We talk about how the shipping industry is under pressure. What trends have you seen in the last couple of months, in the last couple of weeks?
Well, in the last couple of months, things have, as your previous guests also implied, changed very considerably. Because if you take a year ago, container demand was probably down 25 to 30% through Q1, 2, and into the beginning of Q3. And then since then, there has been this tremendous consumer boom. People who normally would have been traveling or going to restaurants or having holidays have basically gone online and started a spending spree. And this has resulted in a tremendous demand for containers and for products from Asia to Europe and Asia to the US. And this has come about quite quickly. And of course, in response, container lines have had to reintroduce capacity very quickly and have responded as best they can. But we have the situation today, which I would say was unexpected. The level of demand was unexpected, but that is really the background.
How will this play out? We're getting reports about congestion in Northeast Asia, like Yangtze River, Ningbo, also ports in India. How bad is it? How will it play out?
Yeah, I mean, there has been definitely congestion building in the places, in the ports that you mentioned, and equally on the west coast of the U.S., as your previous guest also outlined. I think it is a temporary problem. I do not see this being long-term. I think the capacity, there will be additional capacity added into the container line system, and this demand will be dealt with. But just in the run-up to Chinese New Year, of course, there's always a real uptick, particularly in demand for exports from this part of the world. But I think in the medium term, towards mid-year, I would expect to see a leveling out of these current rate increases.
How is this a reflection of the trade situation globally?
Well, as I said before, I think there was a pent-up demand, and this has now come to pass. And trade is. We very much believe in free trade in our organization. We are co-sponsoring a study with the Harvard Kennedy School of Government to show the importance of free trade and how much countries, actually maritime countries, suffer by trade restrictions. We estimate $1.7 trillion through restrictions have been added costs since 2009. So this study, which will come out on the 24th of February, will, I think, throw a lot of light onto this and hopefully help governments to better policies and more enlightened policies towards free trade.
Esben, I mean, we've been here before. It's perhaps a little bit more acute this time round, but isn't it just a perennial problem that we have with the shipping industry, that in hard times they scrap too many ships, and in good times they don't have the supply, if you will, and then they overorder?
Yes, I mean, the supply and demand of capacity of ships, it does vary, obviously, according to demand. And I always say, we know what the supply is because we know the number of ships in the world, we know the number of ships on order. What we do not always know is the demand, and that can vary tremendously. But if you go throughout history, traditionally there has been more capacity than the demand for it.
All right, so looking at the industry as a whole, and you see that one of the big problems of the pandemic has been, of course, getting people off these boats, et cetera, et cetera. And very few countries actually see these sailors as being key workers. And is that a big issue?
It's a huge issue, and we started addressing it in February last year at the outbreak of this pandemic. We saw this coming, and we worked tirelessly with our fellow associations at the G7, the G20, the UN. We even got the Pope to address this problem. And actually throughout 2020 into the beginning of Q4, we made quite a lot of progress, particularly in the excess time of seafarers being on board. But since then, with the introduction of these new strains of the pandemic from the UK, South Africa, and elsewhere, this has caused a here and now problem, and this key worker issue, only 47 countries have so far agreed that they should be treated as such. And so you have situations where seafarers from very small nations like Kiribati, with a population of only 110,000, a South Pacific nation, seafarers stuck all over the world, unable to get home, partly because of no airline capacity. So this problem is huge, and there are hundreds of thousands of seafarers that need to be changed, that are in excess of their contracts, and governments really need to step up to this. I'm sorry to say that the International Labour Convention and through the Maritime Labour Convention has very strict rules on this, and I'm sorry to say that many governments are simply not obeying these rules. Finally, the vaccine, it is critical that governments and ports around the world prioritize seafarers for the vaccine. This is in everybody's interest.
Esben, okay, looking at what's happening now, what's the visibility like? When do you think things are going to improve with regard to this, with prices perhaps normalizing to some extent anyway? Because, I mean, this is a global pandemic and it needs a global response in essence.
Absolutely. We have called for a global response time and again. I've been on this program before, and I've been on many other programs, as has numerous other industry players. We have outlined what the problem is. We all know what the problem is. The problem is that governments need to deal with it, and they need to deal with it now. Singapore is a perfect example of how to do it. We have got protocols here that work very well. Singapore government has been super proactive. And if these protocols that are used locally could be copy and pasted around the world as the gold standard, if you like, I'm sure this problem could be dealt with much better and much more quickly.
Esben, the shipping industry, transportation as a whole, accounts for a significant portion of the carbon emission. Where is the industry in its commitment to decarbonization now?
We, in 2018, developed what we call the Paris Agreement for shipping. We were not part of the Paris Agreement, not because we didn't want to be, but because the politicians, for whatever reason, decided we shouldn't be. So we in the airline industry were not in it. What we have done since then is made very, very specific and strong commitments to decarbonize by 2050. All this is all very well known already, but at the moment we're working very hard on an R&D fund of up to $5 billion US to be a catalyst for the development of tomorrow's fuels. And this is at the IMO at the moment, and we've had great support from major governments such as Japan, but we don't have a total buy-in, and we hope very much that by June of this year, when the MEPC 76 meets at the IMO, that our proposal will be approved. It is not the solution, but it is a catalyst, and we're working with across the universities, governments, institutes of higher learning, research institutes all over the world, and we see this as a catalyst, and it is industry's commitment. We are very serious about this. It is industry commitment to reach the goal we've set.